The state's Republican governor says the legislation will help curb spending. Opponents say it will curb the bargaining power of workers. Those are the headlines. Inside stories coming up.
More protesters are killed in Yemen as popular pressure against President Ali Abdullah Saleh mounts. So, can he survive the unrest this time around? And what are the risks of a political void in Yemen? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Divya Gopalan. On Saturday, Yemeni riot police shot dead a protester and injured at least 5 as thousands gathered in the capital Sana'a for a 9th day of protests. Demonstrations followed Yemen's so-called Day of Rage on Friday, in which at least 6 people were killed in clashes between riot police and protesters. Hashem Al-Habara has more.
The sounds of clashes between government loyalists and pro-reform activists again echoed through the Yemeni capital. The fighting in Sana'a erupted soon after Friday prayers. Government loyalists, armed with knives and batons embedded with nails, attacked protesters demanding the ousting of the government.
When I saw the protesters demanding change, I joined President Saleh's supporters. I am for change, but it has to be peaceful change that protects the country and guarantees progress.
Despite the threats and intimidation, the atmosphere is festive, with the protesters dancing and chanting slogans for the president to go.
We want peaceful dialogue, a peaceful power handover. We condemn violence and the presence of thugs.
In the city of Aden, 1 was killed and many injured in similar clashes. Aden is home to a secessionist movement demanding the south, rich in mineral resources, to break away from the north. The disenchantment in Yemen is also spurred by poverty and high unemployment amongst the young. It's a situation closely monitored by the US, which has recently ramped up its financial and military aid to Yemen to stem the rise of Al-Qaeda. But the Americans are very concerned about the rise in attacks against the protesters. In its first reaction to the ongoing events here, the US Embassy has urged the Yemeni government to ensure the safety of the pro-democracy protesters and their rights to speech and rally. Hashem Al-Habara, AlJazeera, Sana'a.
We're joined by our guests from the Yemeni capital of Sana'a, Sheikh Mohammed Abu Lahom. He's a senior member of the ruling party in Yemen. From London, Zaki Shahab, the editor-in-chief of Arabs Today. It's an online news website. And from Sheffield, a Yemeni-born political and human rights activist, Abdul Razak Saleh. I'd like to put my first question to Sheikh Mohammed Abu Lahom. I want to ask you how you see the protests going from here on. There has been violence. It hasn't dampened the protesters' resolve. How far do you think this can go? Will it only stop at complete regime change?
Well, as far as the protests are going, I think it is very alarming, and the intense of the demonstration is increasing, and it is quite worrying. And I hope that serious and very fast reforms are to be taken. And again, a serious and a very fast dialogue has to be taken with the demonstrators. And I don't think that it is in the interest of the opposition nor the ruling party to see these demonstrations and the casualties and the loss of life. I think it is a big loss to all of us.
Abdul Razak Saleh, are reforms enough to stop the protests?
First of all, thank you for having us on this show. I think reforms are not going to work, and I can only see the protesters carrying on until they get rid of this dictatorship. They've had enough for many years. I mean, 33 years in power will not submit to a proper dialogue, and it will not carry out serious reforms that would make the people of the street, the protesters, happy. They have basically lost faith on this regime. The people who are protesting are decent. They are very serious to go forward and oust this regime that has failed in delivering. Plus, the regime has already lost the credibility among those protesters. Otherwise, I mean, he had, or the head of the regime had enough time, 33 years, which is a golden opportunity to carry out any reforms. And the dialogue with the opposition parties failed, and that's why the street had to go on their own without the opposition parties and without without listening to the regime.
Okay, Zaki Shihab, basically opposition parties are willing to hold talks. The president has said he will step down after 2013 and neither him nor his son will take part in elections. Why do you think this isn't enough?
I believe the stand taken by the opposition is something reasonable, something which really trying to save the country is a seas of blood. Yemen, unlike any other country in the Arab world. One more important thing, that there are millions of pieces of weapon in the country. So any confrontation which might, like, at any stage take a wrong turn, it will end up like, heavy losses. And I don't think that the government or the opposition want to see this. I myself have witnessed the evening both sides of Yemen have signed the agreement for unity in Aden. And if it happened that time, I'm sure other seas of blood. But the wisdom of both parties at that time have saved the country. I do hope that this serious promises, like for reforms, will take place, because no one wants to see more victims falling as a result of not refusing to give up to many of the demands by the protesters. At the same time, I do hope that the country would be saved, because it's whatever going to happen in Yemen, it would have its implication on neighboring countries.
Sheikh Mohammed Abulaham, I want to talk about the violence that we've seen. Why do you think that it has reached these levels when, for instance, in Egypt, it was relatively peaceful?
Well, I think, first of all, I do agree with what many of the guests just mentioned. And let's go back to Egypt. And I think what has happened in Egypt has really opened the doors of democracy, not just in Egypt, but in the Arab world. And the effects of Egypt will be felt everywhere. And just to assure everybody, the doors of democracy have been opened and there is no going back. But we have to be decent and reasonable. And I think Yemen has not reached that tipping point where one would say the fall of the regime is near. But rather, I think we should all together work, whether in the opposition or in the ruling. And I think the initiative that the president gave, let's hold